advertising could be shoppable, and this kind of rethink of advertising as something that has to captivate and drive instant results, or at least it could. And if it could, wouldn't you want it to?
Today I am chatting with Margo Kahnrose, the Chief Marketing Officer at Skai, an omni-channel digital advertising platform.
So what is the shift that you see going on now in performance marketing, and why are these retail walled gardens suddenly even more important than ever before?
I think back in the day when the customer journey was really linear and predictable, but today things are happening so much faster than that. Customers themselves, they want to be empowered to interact with brands however they decide they want to interact. So sometimes, you're seeing an ad for the first time on TV and you're ready to purchase.
What is the role of the pandemic in accelerating all of this?
First of all, the customer became the consumer. Brands are not the ones designing the flow. Consumers are basically telling brands what they want out of them. If you're a brand, would you rather build an impression over time and hope that eventually it results in a sale? Or would you rather get that sale right away and, work on retaining that customer? Once you know what's possible, it's pretty hard to go back.
Where do you think this is going to look like 5 years from now?
I think the idea of...
Welcome to Top CMO. I'm chatting with Margo Kahnrose, CMO at Skai. And Margo, it's interesting because you talk about how, there's a shift to performance marketing now, but that shift isn't the same as performance marketing, how it was really pre-pandemic. So what is the shift that you see going on now in performance marketing, and why are these retail walled gardens suddenly even more important than ever before?
Yeah, I think the shift is in how important and how big of a chunk of your mix performance marketing is looked at today by major brands, as opposed to, how it was looked at earlier, think about 10 years ago. Performance marketing is nothing new. Performance advertising is nothing new. So the idea of, creating, and it's usually digital formats, creating advertising that drives a very direct, measurable response that you can, really cleanly connect to the bottom line of what you're trying to achieve as a marketing team or even as a business. But the channels have changed. And with the advent of retail media and all of a sudden so many new publishers for any brand to have to consider being present on, being visible on, and being, fully optimized across, all of a sudden, it's not just a matter of managing Google ads and Facebook ads. It's, a matter of a full, diverse set of social media platforms that you've got to be on, and a massive set of retailers that if you're any kind of consumer brand, you're going to want to be considering buying ads across. So partly it's just, the channel, the media set has expanded. Partly it's the importance of performance marketing in your mix, especially since the pandemic, when we've been going through ups and downs in this crazy macroeconomic climate. We really can't predict kind of what the next 6 months are going to look like. And CMOs are being looked at to make investments that have short and, midterm payoffs, not long-term, kind of endless fuzzy measurements behind them. So there's a lot of pressure to invest in performance media. There's a lot of performance media to keep track of. And then I think the other really interesting thing that's changing is what it means to be a performance marketer. It used to be about which channels you leverage and how well they perform for you as a marketing org or as a business in terms of hitting certain KPIs. Today, performance marketing, performance media needs to perform for the customer. Customer is the one driving traffic. They're the one deciding, how they want the relationship with a brand to be, from what data they allow to be used, from what, they allow to be tracked, from what they're opting into, to, kind of how quickly they move on to a competitor if they're not happy with the interaction that they're getting with the brand. So the customer is driving the traffic, and the media and the approaches that performance marketers have to take have to allow customers to perform whatever it is they want to perform.
Okay, well, and just to break down all of that, and if people are kind of new to this and new to retail media, first of all, just the kind of the journey and sort of retail sites having their own audiences and selling ads against them. And we're talking really this started by, folks like Amazon, who's starting to, you could just take an ad out on Amazon. We're seeing that cascade to other places. So it goes to Amazon, competitors like Walmart, and goes to other types of sort of retail companies, whether it's Instacart, Target, Lowe's, Home Depot. It starts spreading out from there for anyone who has an audience. And then when you say work well for the customer, you mean for those companies, those sites, like they want to see the ad perform well, or they're going to find a more efficient way or more efficient use of that space in terms of driving overall sales. So is that an accurate kind of rundown of just the journey, to where we are now and the types of companies and sites we're talking about?
I actually mean the end customer, the consumer, the person that the brand is trying to reach through all of these various media channels. When I think about, advertising, typically in the past, it was all about, different channels are meant to contribute to goal X or KPI Y at an expected stage in the shopper journey. So, we used to think about upper funnel stuff. Those were tactics that we used to build awareness and, maybe start to drive consideration. And, the ad formats that you would use there, things like television or radio or out of home, they didn't necessarily, or even on digital, like programmatic display, these were measured by reach and frequency. We don't really know how much they contributed to maybe like the bottom line, end conversion, which was typically a product sale or at least a click through to something like that. And that was fine. Like those ads had a job to do. And then lower funnel media had a different job to do. And that all kind of made sense, I think, back in the day when the customer journey was really linear and predictable. And, we did see this kind of typical funnel shape as customers, kind of went through the discovery process all the way to, to end game, to conversion. But today, things are happening so much faster than that. Customers themselves, they want to be empowered to interact with brands however they decide they want to interact. So sometimes, you're seeing an ad for the first time on TV and you're ready to purchase, or you're being influenced by an ad on social media and you're ready to purchase. You're not like in this kind of long, slow burn discovery awareness mindset. And sometimes you're, looking at a shopping ad at like a DR ad that's, right at the point of sale. And all it does is kind of spark discovery for you. We can no longer, as marketers, predict what a customer is going to want to accomplish out of each engagement that we have with them. And so, it's our job to empower the customer to perform whatever action they want to perform at every, engagement with us. And that means rethinking this funnel concept, understanding that it's collapsed, it's dead, that things happen a lot faster and a lot more fluidly between channels right now. And performance marketing has to enable the customer to perform whatever it is that they want right now. And of course, it has to perform for marketers. And typically, to your point about retail media and the number of like ad networks that all of a sudden marketers, if you're a consumer brand and you're selling products through e-retailers, all of a sudden you've got like, not just one or two more big media platforms that you've got to be making sure that you're present on, but, tens, potentially hundreds. So the challenge for marketers is no longer about like optimizing bids and budgets. Everyone can do that. We all have the tools. They're not expensive anymore, to really, drive really good performance through performance marketing is not hard. The challenge is really about managing that entire publisher mix, managing the one-to-many, and ultimately, one-to-many to one path, I think is the real challenge for marketers right now.
So what you're suggesting, I mean, a typical, if you were gonna, we call it the path to purchase, and then we have a path to passion. The path to purchase is awareness. First, people have to be aware of your brand. Then you have consideration, which is they kind of consider you in consideration set with others, and then ultimately you purchase. So that's the path to purchase. And then the way we would do it as an agency is we would also have the path to passion, which is they have the first experience with the product. they have repeat use with the product, and then they become like kind of fans and advocates, and they really engage. What you're suggesting is that because of the rise of, retail media, which essentially puts you at the point of sale, like if you were at a grocery store and you're like on the rack, right? Like right before you check out, and you can do that. But suddenly you can do that across all these categories. It's not just that limited rack with like candy bars and magazines at the grocery store. It's all these things. Then it might compress this whole process, and you might have people that have encountered your brand, know your brand. Others are just like making an impulse buy just because they saw it there. They just want to get it. And there's different purposes. So you have to give back a little bit of control to them, because you don't have a classic journey they're going to go on.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I think that idea, that construct, that, awareness to consideration, discovery, awareness, whatever, to consideration, to purchase, that's a construct that as marketers, we've relied on for a long time, because we could architect that journey for customers. Digital was our playground, and we could guide customers, kind of through the experiential, kind of touch points that we had in mind. And the explosion of e-commerce really, kind of changed that power dynamic. The explosion, even if you just think of Amazon and all of the brands that we have access to as customers now that we never even knew existed before, there's this kind of leveling of the playing field that happens on e-commerce where, everybody's got the same, kind of shelf space digitally. And as a result, customers have more competition to choose from for any given purchase, big or small. They have the ability to compare and, kind of evaluate every different factor that's important to them: price, quality, reviews, in seconds. And as a result, they're in control. And, we as marketers, we just want to enable them. We just want to enable them to, make that impulse buy if that's the mindset that they're in. We want to, enable them to build a relationship with us if we've made a good impression, and kind of stay in our universe. And I don't think we really knew what was possible before retail media. Retail media really taught marketers that, you could use advertising to drive sales immediately, like not, kind of down the line, but immediately. Advertising could be shoppable. And other performance channels took the cue. From search ads to specifically social media ads with the explosion of social commerce. This is all kind of spurred from the shift to digital, and this kind of rethink of advertising as something that has to captivate and drive instant results, or at least it could. And if it could, wouldn't you want it to? If you're a brand, would you rather kind of build an impression over time and hope that eventually it results in a sale? Or would you rather get that sale right away and, work on retaining that customer, driving them to passion, as you put it? Once you know what's possible, it's pretty hard to go back.
And what is the role of the pandemic in accelerating all of this? Is it just that a lot of these, retail media or walled gardens, as you put it, just need a certain amount of sort of traffic to be a viable ad platform, and the pandemic, everyone went digital and it just supplied the traffic, so it just like got this stuff off the ground? Is that the legacy of the pandemic in this, or is it something different?
I think the pandemic really created a shift in timelines. So, we at Skai, we work with enterprise level businesses, so they could be massive household name, CPGs. And we work with direct to consumer companies or emerging brands. What we saw was, the direct to consumer, kind of emerging brands, like digital is their playground. E-commerce is their world. So they were native already to not just, selling in that way, but being really good at direct response advertising, at using search and social to drive traffic and sales. all they had to do was think about, okay, so are we ready to, sell through more distribution channels, like, broaden our reach through, by selling on some of the marketplaces, for example. And if so, what advertising do we need to use to support those efforts? What was really wildly interesting, I think, to us as a business was to see these massive brands, the leaders of category, with huge budgets, the ones who put those, $6 million Super Bowl commercials on every year, really be kind of caught unawares when it came to moving things digital. So first, they all of a sudden had to sell digital. If you were a brand that was used to selling through the grocery store, then, the physical grocery store was actually your client. You had more feedback from them than you did from the end customer. How often do you,
and actually that it's an important point just to jump in on that, because from the brand perspective, if you say customer, they actually mean the store. The consumer would be the end person purchasing, but for them, their customer, their person they have to satisfy is like a buyer who's determining, what kind of shelf space they're going to get. That's their customer. And as a result, they're very conscious of what is the relationship with these customers. For instance, I'll give you an example of a client where, they do, they sell products at Home Depot. Because of that relationship, Home Depot will come to them and say, hey, we need a new we see this emerging trend. Millennials are buying this kind of home improvement product. We don't have a good product there. Can you make one for us? And it's this symbiotic relationship. So how does it work now with retail media, walled gardens, and has that changed the dynamic of the relationship between the brands and the retailers, and what that dynamic is?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, the customer became the consumer. That happened because brands that, typically you wouldn't buy online, you suddenly were buying online. Like suddenly you were buying ketchup, online. You were ordering it through Instacart or from Amazon or from, any one of the grocery kind of category stores that went big online during the pandemic. And it's a different universe when, you're a customer buying online versus buying what's just in front of you in the store that is convenient for you to go to. All of a sudden, any store is convenient for you to go to. So if you're that ketchup brand and you've never really had to think about how to reach and engage that end consumer when they've got so many more brands that all of a sudden they're, are in their consideration set, it was something you had to start thinking about right away. And a lot of these companies really didn't have a lot of data about their end consumers. They didn't have the performance marketing chops to, kind of drive traffic to their offerings. And when retail media, kind of heated up as an ad format, all of a sudden, the competition was that much more fierce because there were those who were just paying for more eyeballs. And if you weren't actually paying to be visible through sponsored listings as well as organic listings, then your chances of getting into that, kind of end consideration set were completely reliant on brand familiarity and brand loyalty. So we saw these really big, sophisticated brands have a very steep learning curve when it came to digital marketing to actual end consumer acquisition. And, that basically accelerated the speed at which they were going after acquiring some of these, kind of more digital chops, like 5 years in a year. And that actually put the pressure back on D2Cs, on the digital native companies who weren't used to having to compete in their own backyard with mega brands with mega budgets. So, both kind of sides of the marketplace really had to get very sophisticated very quickly. And it became kind of a game of not like who can optimize their ads the best, although that was important, but who kind of really understood the end consumer and all the changes they were going through the most, and who could support that person so that they could build a really kind of a lasting relationship that that is the now relationship, the relationship where, brands are not the ones designing the flow. Consumers are basically telling brands what they want out of them.
And then, of course, it brings in a whole bunch of other factors, because if you're now closer to the point of sale, if it's digital, now suddenly review, I mean, maybe you didn't care that much about your product reviews if you weren't in that channel that were online, but now you really care if it's like right next to your ad, or people are going. So suddenly you have to get other maybe other divisions of your marketing team like up and running, because now we have to do that. Also, if it's mostly just Facebook and Google and it's kind of this duopoly, then you can kind of just like, it's simple. You can have sort of like separate teams. Are you doing search? Are you doing social? You don't have to make any of that really talk or communicate at all. But suddenly it's not just that, it's changing. It even could impact the structure of your marketing team. Might need to change. You might need a reorg if you're a CMO just to make all these things work together.
Yeah. And we're seeing that, basically what we're seeing is wave one was like adopt retail media in addition to the other channels that, you're already putting money into, and test some budgets out and figure out what it can do for you. Maybe even figure out which retailers are your best, are your best bet beyond maybe Amazon. Because for a lot of companies, it's not just an Amazon world. But then there was phase two. And phase two is where you say, all right, so this channel isn't going anywhere. It's a big moneymaker, both for brands and for, the retailers themselves, because we know ad revenue is very profitable revenue. So if you're a retailer, you want to add that revenue stream as quickly as possible. So now, really where the rubber meets the road is, can you connect what's happening in your retail media marketing to the rest of your advertising? Can you start to construct, a connective thread between your other performance channels, like paid search, like paid social, and, channels like programmatic display, and of course, things like connected TV? Can you start to connect the dots between those? Because now you've got a lot of publishers to think about. And the other thing we haven't even talked about yet that was happening at the same time was the loss of data signals that marketers suddenly were facing as everything moved from, opt out to opt in. And we saw, kind of the impending death of the third-party cookie, which is the thing that marketers had been relying on primarily to piece together a holistic view of the customer across all of these different touch points and channels.
What has been the impact on the traditional publishers, meaning not the retail sites? They want to sell ads. Two, by this moving towards, closer to the point of sale, digitally speaking, plus the loss of third-party cookies, what have you seen as the impact on all the other publishers that might have been top of funnel kind of a way, just have big audiences, eventually you're going to send people, over with an ad to convert somewhere else? What has been the impact on them?
Well, the whole world of, open web programmatic advertising is undoubtedly existentially challenged. I mean, it's going through a lot of change because what worked for 20 years was suddenly not available anymore to be kind of like the through line for marketers. So, and at the same time, those channels, if they wanted to be considered performance channels, when push comes to shove, and the push and the shove being, the economy, and, kind of the ins and outs of recessions, what's really performance is going to be scrutinized, and you're going to be held accountable to it. So what we've seen is a shift. We've seen a shift of dollars from open web advertising to, closed web, or these walled gardens that I'm talking about, because these are environments that are not reliant on third-party cookies to kind of piece together what's happening with the customer. They have their own, kind of first-party relationship with customers. They've already got all the opt-ins and permissions that they need in order to serve good advertising. And as a result, they're kind of future-proof for marketers. The question really just becomes, how can marketers connect the dots between them if they have these, walls, so to speak, guardrailing all of that that rich customer data.
Final question is, so what is this going to mean for 5 years from now? If that's, I don't know if that's phase 3 or stage 3 or phase 4 or stage 4, we can number them however. What is this going to look like? Where do you think this is going to look like 5 years from now? What's the next phase?
I think the idea of shoppable media is only going to accelerate. So I think you're going to see a convergence of what we would think of as top of funnel advertising and bottom funnel, kind of calls to action. I think we're going to start to see sort of a mashup happening where even kind of broad awareness tactics are going to tie directly to actionability and kind of real business impact conversions. So I think those, kind of KPIs, what we expect from branding advertising is going to look quite similar to what we expect from performance advertising.
And we're already seeing that somewhat. I mean, with recent news from TikTok that there's now shopping ads and there's doing more. And you would have thought of TikTok as just like a branding platform, right? This silly video of someone, I don't know, dancing to something with your product, just good to get your name out there. But, maybe it's closer to the end of the funnel than we think. That would be one example.
Oh, yeah. I mean, TikTok made me buy it, like that's it's a hashtag for a reason. Yeah. I myself have bought like 3 products in the last, 2 weeks because of being TikTok influenced.
Okay. What did you buy?
There's a line of body wash at Target called Cremo, and I'm like a big fan of very expensive perfumes. It's a bad habit, the Le Labo brand. And TikTok, influencer said, this is like an affordable line that, smells like the Le Labo, kind of luxury scents. So, something like that, I'm like, done. I'm going to go buy
There you go. You're a
and
savvy marketer. You're being marketed to. Someone did it, but you're like, still, that's spot on for what I'm looking for.
But can I just tell you, when I was checking out, the guy at Target said, oh, I've heard of these. And I heard of a different one too. I actually heard of them on TikTok. And I was like, yeah, me too. That's literally like, okay. I mean, it's hilarious. Like you can't make a better ad for the platform's advertising goals. And I think the other big shift that we're going to see is in the way technology is expected and utilized to, kind of support these efforts for marketers. Like we've been in a kind of a big soup of point solutions when it comes to tech platforms for the last 20 years. And there was all this kind of like best of breed buying behavior that I think is going to be a lot less relevant with so many new ad publishers to keep up with. It's really going to be about driving efficiencies of scale, kind of looking at ad tech the way you look at SaaS as a marketer, having kind of controlled costs, more transparency in pricing models and the way we buy these things, and, really kind of more cohesion between how these channels are managed, to your point, how the teams that, kind of support these channels collaborate. So I think we're going to see a shift from point solutions to platforms, and that's going to create a lot of consolidation in the space. It's going to be pretty interesting to watch.
According to Margo Kahnrose, as retail marketing evolves and shoppable media gains traction, the challenges faced by traditional publishers and the changing landscape of advertising technology are shaping the future of digital. The lines between top-of-funnel advertising and bottom-funnel calls to action are blurring, and the loss of third-party cookies is forcing publishers to adapt or be left behind. As marketers and CMOs, let's keep our finger on the pulse of these transformations and proactively seek out innovative solutions. Margo says by staying in tune with the shift from point solutions to platforms, we can ride the wave of consolidation in the ad tech space and seize new opportunities for growth. What's the result? A marketing organization that thrives in the face of change, one that's ready to excel in the dynamic world of digital advertising. For Top CMO, I'm Ben Kaplan.